Hello my dear viewers. In this video, we are discussing about the first Vachana of Jedara Dasimayya, which explains the inner realization is more important than spiritual performance. Let us start. First of all, introduction. This profound Vachana is a classical expression of Virashaiva mysticism. This Vachana was composed by one of the great Vachanakara, ending with the pen name or a signature Rāmanātha, that is Jedara Dasimayya. The pen name or a signature suggesting either the invoked deity or an intimate expression of the realized divine. The Vachana confronts superficial religiosity, speaks to the ineffable experience of the divine and the divine union, and centers itself on the mystery of Linga, not as an external idol, but as an inner spiritual truth that illuminates within the Aṅga-liṅga samarasya, the union of human body and the Linga. This is not a moralistic utterance, but a metaphysical, mystical, and the ontological declaration that critiques the dualistic notion of God as other. Instead, it champions the transcendental immanence of the divine revealed through the tapas, inner detachment, and the direct mystical experience of the self, which cannot be named, showed, and expressed. First Vachana, Aṅga-liṅgada Oḷage, Liṅgakaṅgaḻu Beḷagu, Hiṅgalāpude Hēḷu Ajñānava, saṅga-sukha-mathanada, asaṅgadindadanaridu, Hiṅgalike Hesarēnu Rāmanātha. Translation: within the body Linga, the eyes of the Lingas shine. Can ignorance truly be dispelled? Tell me, knowing it through the detached churning of ecstatic bliss. What is the name of that dispeller, O Rāmanātha? Word by word meaning. First one, Aṅga-liṅgada, which means of the union of body, and Linga, which means Shiva. Second word, Oḷage, which means within or inside. Third word is Liṅgakaṅgaḻu, which means eyes of the Linga. Fourth word, Beḷagu, which means shine forth or illuminate. Fifth word, Hiṅgalāpude, which means does it dispelling ignorance or not. Sixth word is Hēḷu, which means speak or tell. Seventh word is Ajñānava, which means ignorance or ignorant one. Eighth word is saṅga-sukha-mathanada, which means of the churning of attachmental pleasures, which means saṅga-sukha or human worldly pleasures, because all the pleasures are short moment in a life to be understood. Ninth word is asaṅgadindadanaridu, which means having known through the detachment of all worldly pleasures. 10th word, Hiṅgalike, which means which dispelling ignorance. 11th word is Hesarēnu, which means what name can you given to that dispeller, which removes or which dispel the ignorance. Finally, Rāmanātha. Rāmanātha, the invoked or experienced divine, which is also the pen name of the Jedara Dasimayya. Next main point is explanation. Within the union of human body and Linga, eyes of the Linga radiates or illuminates, then it removes ignorance of our soul and gives inner realization or anubhava, knowledge, merged into Shivatva. Then it is said to be body Linga union. When churning the joy of attachment of worldly pleasures, and it is realized by the detachment of all worldly pleasures, because all worldly pleasures are short moment in life, so it is to be understood by detachment of all worldly pleasures. Finally, in the last line, Jedara Dasimayya asking the name of that remover or a dispeller of the ignorance to his divine Rāmanātha, So, the name of the dispeller of that ignorance is only the inner realization or anubhava, knowledge, and merged into a Shivatva or Shivatattva completely, and the spiritual awakening. Which means whole the body is considered as a linga, human body is itself linga, and linga is itself human body. So in this body, eyes of the linga illuminates, which means knowledge or inner realization or spiritual awakening. This spiritual awakening is root out the ignorance or unawareness by the churning of the worldly pleasures of attachments, get awareness by the detachment. Then you tell me, what is the name of that dispeller of ignorance? Here, in this Vachana, Jedara Dasimayya strongly proposed that spiritual awakening or inner realization is more important than external religious show-offs or ignorance. He also suggests that devotees finally gets detachment from all the worldly pleasures of attachments and the union with the linga physically and mentally and spiritually. He also pinpointedly named that dispeller of ignorance, which are spiritual awakening or inner realization or anubhava, knowledge merged into Shivatva. So Jedara Dasimayya asked the question and also himself answered through the divine Rāmanātha to the people. So Jedara Dasimayya strongly suggests that inner realization or anubhava, spiritual awakening, is most important than the pretentious, hypocrite, external religious show-off. Philosophical theme. This Vachana is constructed on 4 interwoven spiritual and philosophical concepts. First one, Aṅga-liṅga union. The phrase Aṅga-liṅgada Oḷage immediately plunges us into the Veerashaiva metaphysics of body, which means Anga, and Linga. In Veerashaiva Siddhanta, the Linga is not an idol or a symbol, but the inner consciousness, the suprapersonal essence. The body is not seen as a sinful, but as a seat of realization, the very temple of divine revelation. Thus the Linga resides within, and the spiritual seekers become Bhakta Yogi who experiences illumination in this union. Second one, critic of internality. The second line, can ignorance truly be dispelled? Tell me. It is powerful critic of ritualism, external religiosity, and the dogmatic display. The Jedara Dasimayya denounce mere ostentation in the favor of inward awakening. The loud chanting, ritual show, or a dramatic bhakti is condemned if not rooted in inner realization. Third one, churning and transcendence. The third line, knowing it through the detached churning of ecstatic bliss. It refers to the mythic and metaphysical process of mathana, which means churning, akin to the Samudra Manthana in the Vedic myth, where the seekers churn the ocean of attachments and the pleasures, which means saṅga-sukha, to arrive at higher essence. Here, asanga, which means detachment, is not apathy but a lucid, active disengagement from the snares of duality. Then it is understood the dispellers of the ignorance. Fourth one, name of that dispeller, that is inner realization. The fourth line, what is the name of that dispeller, O Rāmanātha? It is the mystical riddle. Once realization dawns, what can one say of it? What name can one give it? This Vachana asserts that true spiritual realization is nameless, beyond articulation, beyond form, only to be experienced but not expressed. Next main point is inner meaning and the layer of interpretations. Let us now break down the Vachana into 4 interpretive strata, which, when integrated, show the multidimensional richness of the mystical voice. First one, ontological layer of Anga and Linga. In Veerashaiva philosophy, Anga, which means body, is not discarded as a impure or unworthy. Instead, the Anga is the vessel of awakening. The Linga, symbolizing the universal consciousness of Shiva, is implanted within the devotee. This mystical union is called Aṅga-liṅga Samarasya, the perfect non-dual merger of the individual and divine. Within the Aṅga-liṅga union, the lingas shine forth. This suggested that the following points. The first one is the seeker, when attuned to the internal linga, sees divine radiance within. Second one is the multiple manifestations of linga are the various insights, divine vibrations, or internal illuminations one experiences in mystical union. Third one is the body itself is transfigured into the sacred field where Shiva is both seeker and sought. This is comparable to the realization in Vedanta that the Atman, which means self, and the Brahman, which means the absolute, are not different. The distinction between knower and known dissolves. Second one is the ethical and devotional layer, condemning the Ajñāna or ignorance. The second line of the Vachana, can ignorance truly be dispelled? Tell me. This line is both rebuke and the wake-up call. According to the Jedara Dasimayya, the ignorant or ignorance is as the follows. First one who seeks God in temples or objects while ignoring the inner. Second one is one who performs rituals and chants loudly without inner transformation. Third one is one who reduces devotion to display, forgetting that true spirituality is silent, inward, and pure. This line also touches upon the silence as a spiritual virtue. True yogis and the realized beings often retreat into mystical silence, where words are too crude to express the divine. Third one, the soteriological layer of Mathana and Asanga. The third line of the Vachana, knowing it through the detached churning of ecstatic bliss. It is a philosophical description of the process of liberation. Through the detachment of the churning, the pleasures of attachments, one comes to realization. This is an elegant condensation as of the followings. First one, Bhoga, which means enjoyment. Its next phase is Vairagya, which means dispassion. Finally, next phase is Jnana, which means wisdom. The people caught in worldly attachments, which means Sangha, begin to churn through the followings. First one, meditation. Second one, reflection. Third one, moral living. And fourth one, tapas, which means spiritual austerity. In the process, the ego is broken. What remains is asanga, which means unshakable clarity of non-attachments. This is the path to self or inner realization or anubhava. The term adanaridu, which means having known, is significant. It is not intellectual knowing, but anubhava, direct, luminous experience of the real. It suggests the arrival of Shunya, which means void, Sat, which means being, or Chit, which means consciousness. where the individual no longer remains an ego but merges with the vast. Fourth one is the mystical, ineffable layer. What name can you give? The fourth line of the Vachana is, what is the name of that dispeller, O Rāmanātha? This is the climax part of the Vachana. Names, forms, and categories of all products of dualistic consciousness. Once the yogi crosses the threshold of ego and enters into the nirvikalpa state, which means beyond thought, even Linga loses its symbolic boundary and becomes the pure beings. This line suggests the followings. First one, realization cannot be thought, transferred, or verbalized. Second one, even calling it Shiva or Rāmanātha or the divine is pointer, not the truth. Third one, the highest truth is Anama, which means nameless, Nirguna, which means qualityless, and the Nirakara, which means formless. Next main point is comparison with the other text. This Vachana is also compared with the Mandukyopanishad, which also represents the same concept of inner realization. According to the Mandukyopanishad, explains as below: Na karmana, na prajaya, danena atmanam, viditva, tapas brahmacharyena, shraddhaya. Meaning, self or inner realization is achieved through the austerity, celibacy, and faith, but not by rituals, wealth, or progeny. The Mandukyopanishad also declares the final state as below: Na antaprajnam, na bahirprajnam, avyavaharyam, agrahyam, alakshanam, achintyam, which means self or inner realization cannot be thought, grasped, or named. Thus, even saying this is the Linga after realization is conceptual ignorance. Thus, this is the declaration of non-duality and realization similar to the Aham Brahmasmi, which means I am Brahman. The role of Rāmanātha, the invocation of the Rāmanātha at the end of the Vachana, which means the followings. First one, acts as a spiritual punctuation to the Vachana. Second one, suggests that the poet's realized self is no other than Rāmanātha. Third one, the invoked deity and the invoking the self have become one. Fourth one, the questioning and the answering through the favorite divine. 11th main point is broader context within Veerashaivism. This Vachana is sit at the heart of the Veerashaiva mystical praxis because of the followings. First one, Shatsthala Marga, which means six-fold mystical progression. Second one, Linganga Samarasya, which means Linga body union. Third one is Anubhava, which means realization over Shravana, which means hearing, or Kirtana, which means singing. And the fourth point is inner purity over outer show. Fifth one, it contrasts the Ajñāni, which means ignorant ritualist, but supports the Jnani, which means realized mystic. Finally, conclusion. This Vachana is not merely a poem, but a verbal samadhi. It demands the followings. First one, inner inquiry. Second one, dispassion. Third one, silence. Fourth one, meditative realization. The message of this Vachana is very clear as follows. First one, the divine is not in the outer temple, but within your own body, within your own soul. Second one, the Linga is not a stone, but the light of consciousness. Third one, attachment must be churned until only the pure ghee of the realization remains. Fourth one, once that is known, you cannot speak of it, name it, or show it. That is inner realization. As such, this Vachana is sword against the spiritual ignorance and the lamp for the mystic seeker, walking path to the inner realization. Rāmanātha is not just a name, it is the soundless sound at the end of the inner realization. Thank you.